Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast's NBA offseason preview series. We're going to go through all 30 teams and talk about what decisions they have to make this upcoming offseason. We started this earlier this week with the Boston Celtics. We're now going to move to the only team that was ahead of the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference standings today with the Cleveland Cavaliers. If you're watching on YouTube, great. You're going to get some visual aids. You're going to be able to understand what we're talking about a little bit. Go subscribe over at the YouTube channel. Over 35,000 of you have done that already. We really appreciate it. In addition, this will go up on the podcast feed as well for the thousands upon thousands of you that listen over there to the show. Let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, though, Bryce. 64 wins, and ultimately they fall short in the NBA playoffs again in the second round. An interesting team, at the very least, a great team that took a massive leap this year under Kenny Atkinson. You saw a huge jump from Evan Mobley across the board, in my opinion. You saw Darius Garland get back to what makes him such a special offensive player now that he is a year removed from the jaw injury that really seemed to hinder him during the 2023-24 season. I am genuinely really interested to see what the Cavaliers do this summer because they have a lot of difficult financial decisions that they're going to have to make following their decision to acquire DeAndre Hunter at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and not just cap decisions. I think just decisions of, okay, well, this was the first year with a new coach. This was some would argue this is the first year we saw this team fully healthy playing together. You mentioned Evan Mobley's growth on the offensive end. We highlighted and gave love all year to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell playing off each other. And then it breaks down in a playoff series against the Indiana Pacers, where Garland missed the first two games of that series. I believe Mitchell ended the series with an ankle or something like that. And my question would be what if the Pacers go on to win the NBA Finals or make the NBA? What if they knock off the Knicks and go to the NBA Finals? Does that change? Do you look at we were better than every team in the East except for one? And if that's truly the case, if you look at that and really say either the Pacers are just a bad matchup for us or the Pacers are the one team in the East that's better than us, do you just go and say, hey, let's retool this whole thing? I think it's easy to say they need to trade Darius Garland and or Jarrett Allen. I would not mess with Donovan Mitchell or Evan Mobley for what it's worth. I'm not touching either of those guys. But I see a side of where people just say, you have a good team. You were an awesome regular season team. Give Kenny Atkinson a year to grow. Give another year of chemistry for this team and go back and make another run at it, as opposed to just quickly saying, trade one or both of those guys. This isn't going to work.
Just a few quick notes before we get into this on their overall financial picture. So they are $55 million over the cap. They're going to blow way over the cap here. They're actually already, we have listed on the sheet here, if you're watching on YouTube, which again, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have it as $5 million over the projected second apron right now. It's actually more like 10 to 13 million over the second apron, because of Evan Mobley hitting that 30% marker in his contract due to winning Defensive Player of the Year. He will likely make All NBA as well. So he is going to be a 30% max as opposed to a 25% max. And that is a real factor here for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Donovan Mitchell is going to make about $11 million more per season next year because his 3-year contract extension kicks in. And then Evan Mobley is actually going to make right around $35 million more next season, which is why they were able to kind of stay beneath the thresholds this season in terms of their, allocations. They were, I think, even, if I remember correctly, just right below the first apron this season. And I think they weren't even a tax team, if I remember correctly, this year. But next season, they are on pace to blow through that. That's why the financial picture.
They came in right under the tax, Sam. 770,000 under the tax, $5.5 million under the first apron.
Yep. And even though the salary cap is projected to jump next season by about $14 million, they're still already $22 million over the luxury tax line for next season. So the first two questions here go hand in hand. it's also just worth noting their free agents. Ty Jerome is as a free agent where they have early bird rights on him. Sam Merrill, they have full bird rights on. I don't know how capable they are of keeping either of those guys, depending on how willing they are to be flexible in the season and be able to, go out and make moves if they feel like they have to. We'll talk about the free agents in a minute, but ultimately the big question for me is twofold. First, just how much do they have to spend? Like, is Dan Gilbert willing to go crazy and spend as much as it takes to win a title? I would applaud that. I would be all for it. I would also understand it if they think that they might need to stay flexible and be below the second apron in some way, shape, or form. You're not going to hear an argument from me either way. The big question to me is ultimately around the core. Is this the core that they want to move forward with? Yes or no? If it is, great. Figure out a way to make it work around the finances, probably by trying to move DeAndre Hunter, Isaac Okoro, whoever you can move, right? Or do they decide, hey, we know Darius got hurt this year, but we're just not real sure that we love the Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell fit in the playoffs long term, because that's where they jumped to by winning 64 games this season. Correct. They jumped into an echelon where, because Evan Mobley has taken this leap, because Jared Allen is as good as he is, because Donovan Mitchell is one of the best playoff performers of his era, they do need to kind of decide, hey, is this really the core we want to build around here moving forward? If it's yes, I completely understand that. The Eastern Conference next season, because the Cavaliers obviously will be without Jason Tatum for a significant portion of the season. Giannis Antetokounmpo's situation seems in flux, let's go with. There are a number of reasons why I think they could look at this and just go, we're going to run this back and we're going to go for it again, and we think we're going to make the finals and maybe win a title. Again, if that's their argument, I'm totally good with it. I do and always have had real questions about the Garland Mitchell fit in the playoffs, because the playoffs are all about matchups. They're all about the situations that you find yourself in. And in many ways, they're often about who the weakest link on the court is. And Darius Garland is an amazing offensive player. He is a phenomenal, fantastic offensive player. He is somebody that can get taken advantage of due to how small he is. Additionally, in the Pacers series particularly, Jared Allen repeatedly got hit by Tyrese Halliburton in space. And I actually think Jarrett tends to be pretty okay in space. But against Halliburton, he really struggles. I think it might be the change of pace that Halliburton uses. He really struggles, Halliburton, in terms of stopping him from getting to his right hand, which everybody knows that he wants to be able to get to. And the Cavs, to me, are in a position organizationally where they should really care about specific matchups in the playoffs and how those matchups bear themselves out on the court. They are one of the 2 or 3 teams in the league, really, maybe there are 5, I don't know, but it's a handful of them that really should be caring about this, in my opinion. So do you have an opinion on this in terms of the way they should go with Garland? I kind of struggle and I go back and forth with it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I gave my little spiel about why you could say that you just want to run it back. I think I would look to move Darius this offseason now. And I jumped the gun almost 12 months ago when I said in my preseason preview that they would do it at the deadline. And I was wrong for the majority of the regular season. Again, I'm like you. I would understand if they want to run it back. I know this is much easier said than done. It's very dangerous to shop a player and then decide you don't like the offers and say, you know what, we'll just keep you. It'll be okay. That's really hard to do. I would assume they have a idea of what Darius Garland market would be like, what the return could be like for him. I think you want to explore that. I would want to explore that. If I was making the decisions, I would want to have a beat on what can we bring back in terms of some wing depth, some, both ends of the floor type of players, and feel good that you have Donovan Mitchell and this growing Evan Mobley. And that's another part of the equation, Sam, is you're probably not going to give an offensive firepower as strong as Darius Garland in this trade return. So I think that would be a bet on Evan Mobley's offense, not only holding, but probably taking yet another step forward next season if you were going to move off of Darius.
So my ultimate question is, if you do want to have, and we should have this conversation probably up front, if you do want to move Darius, and I'm not opposed to it, honestly, because I think Darius is an amazing player. I'm just not totally convinced of the playoff fit between him and Donovan Mitchell long term. I think it's just really hard to win with two small guards. Trying to find who the team is that works best for Darius Garland is difficult, in my opinion. And it's because he is like a smaller guard. Like the Utah Jazz to me are the ultimate team that like need a point guard and should be looking at somebody like Darius Garland. But like for the Jazz, right? Does it make sense for them to do like a Lowry Markkanen center deal around Darius Garland? Probably not for me. If I'm Utah. Even if you like Darius more than you like Lowry, you're kind of plugging one hole to open another.
I agree.
Right? Because you're trying to build out your organization. Maybe the Cavs feel some type of way about like a Taylor Hendricks coming off of injury. Maybe they, really would like a Keontae George or somebody like that, right? Maybe they just would really appreciate having players like that. I don't really see the fit with Utah personally, unless there's like a third team involved. I do think that Darius Garland makes sense to the Jazz. Like if I was the Jazz, that would probably be a player I would really be going for this summer. But like, is there a third team that you can kind of see that has something that the Cavs should want for Darius Garland? Because again, your goal is really to try to compete now, right? Your goal is not to like go get some younger assets to try and make it work, right? So like that's kind of what I'm struggling with is there like a 3-team deal out there where the Jazz end up with Darius Garland and, they get some wings in Cleveland and Donovan Mitchell just slides to the point guard position?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I like Utah. I want to throw out a couple other names and see, and we may run into the same thing. Brooklyn is going to be a consistent team that comes up here, but sure. I think Brooklyn's a name. What about Orlando, Sam? What are your thoughts with Orlando? We always talk about them needing a little bit more firepower. My thing with people that always say like point guard for Orlando though is like Paolo is going to play with the ball in his hands a lot, and Franz is going to play with the ball in his hands a lot. And obviously, we both think Jalen Suggs is awesome defensively. What is the return there? How does that backcourt look? So Orlando was a team that like makes a little bit of sense to me there. I want to say Dallas, but that's just funny. Either of those two.
So here's what I would say about the Orlando fit, and like I'm for it in general. If I was Cleveland, I would be like fairly terrified to move him to Orlando and then have to play the Magic in the playoffs. Like you'd kind of be setting them up with a real issue that they need. I also think Darius has proven Darius, when he was growing up, was like an off-ball player. And that's why I think it's been so easy for him to transition toward being, a great partner for Donovan Mitchell.
Agreed.
Right. Yep. He is really good at playing off the ball. So I love the fit in Orlando. It's just like, I think Franz is more valuable than he is, frankly. I don't think Jalen Suggs is enough. And honestly, if I have Darius Garland at 39 versus Suggs at 35, like, you better be paying me some like real money, in my opinion, or like some real pick capital back if I'm doing something like that.
I had somebody throw that one at me and I think balancing the value is a really fun conversation, but it was like Darius goes down there and, kind of runs and then Suggs comes to Cleveland and is like that, the defensive backcourt mate next to Donovan Mitchell. I was like, okay, that's interesting. How do you build out the rest of that though?
Yeah. I mean, that's that's definitely hard and it feels tricky. I mean, the other spot that is interesting is Sacramento. Like, is there a way that Sacramento would look? I don't think this makes sense for Sacramento, to be clear, but like, is there like a Keegan Murray center deal for Donovan or for Darius Garland?
Yeah, I mean, only if I'm also moving some of the other guys that are there, though. Like, I'm not putting a backcourt together of Darius, Zach, and Malik, although that would be really, really interesting. That's a lot of dynamic backcourt guard play in that scenario. But
and here'd be my last one, right? The Suns seem like they've been in the mix for a guard for a while. Is there any way that like there's a Garland Kevin Durant move out there?
Ooh. Interesting. Okay.
It's hard. Like, it'd have to basically be like, well, these two teams, neither of them can aggregate players right now. And
the salaries don't match then, right?
Yeah, that KD makes too much money. Like, I don't even know that you can make that deal work, to be honest with you. But the idea of it is like big wing to Cleveland who can really score and fill it up and play on defense a little bit. Like, that's an intriguing one to me as well.
I was talking to somebody last night that with all the Giannis talk, I kind of had forgotten that Kevin Durant is essentially on the market as well and is kind of getting overshadowed because, you know, Giannis to Cleveland is something I've seen people bring up as well in this scenario. You know, I think that would probably start with Darius and Jarrett Allen going back to Milwaukee. Oh, but they can't, you just said they can't do that. They can't aggregate. So
I believe that they cannot aggregate.
They'd have to make a move to get under before they would be able to do it. So
yeah. And that's where it's worth bringing up the DeAndre Hunter of it all too.
Yep.
So DeAndre Hunter is slated to make $23 million and $24 million over each of the next 2 years. I don't know about you, man. Like, I know that he finished, what did he finish in? Sixth man of the year, like fairly high, like in the top 5 or 6, if I remember correctly. I did not think he was fairly effective with Cleveland. I thought that like he kind of bogged things down a little bit when he got there, and he shot the ball well, obviously, like he made 42% of his threes, but defensively he's fine in specific matchups on the ball, like against bigger wings, but that's really all that he can do on defense is like kind of body up against bigger wings. Like, I don't even really love him against guards, honestly. So if I could get off that money, like I would be all for it. I'm just not totally sure who the team is that's going to be really excited about taking on the DeAndre Hunter money right now.
Yeah, he finished 4th in Sixth Man of the Year, right behind another player we'll have to talk about on his team here in a little bit, and Ty Jerome. Yeah, I mean, he shot the ball really well in Atlanta. He shot the ball really well in Cleveland as well. That's the other thing. It's like, it's his first year shooting over 40% from 3 on this level of volume. Now, the last 2 years, both have been really, really good. But before that, he was kind of like mid 30s. So that's what's always interesting with these shooters as well is, okay, is he what he was his first 4 years, a mid 30s guy, or did something click, change? And is he truly now a 38, 39, 40% guy on 6 attempts a game? Because I do think that's where a lot of his value comes at this point, because, I think I'm kind of with you in terms of the defense. And so the shot making and the floor spacing is really, really important. But yeah, at those numbers, that's tough.
It's really hard. It's really, really hard. And again, you know, we talked about this in the Celtics preview too, but there just are not a lot of teams with cap space to be able to take that kind of money on. Like, this is not one that I think Detroit will be interested in. This is not one, you know, maybe again, you could convince Brooklyn to take the money, but this is not a team that has a lot of assets to be able to throw at Brooklyn either to convince them to be able to take the money. Right. So it gets tricky for Cleveland financially. In a way. And look, this is where it might end up that they have to keep DeAndre Hunter and unfortunately part with Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. And that would be like a real killer to me, because part of what made the Cavs so good this year was their bench unit. the fact that they came at you in waves. And I know Ty Jerome really struggled in the playoffs, and I have an immense number of questions about him playing in the playoffs. I thought Sam Merrill was kind of awesome in the playoffs, if I'm being honest. And I think he is people will point to Ty Jerome as being their key free agent. I don't really agree with that. I think Sam Merrill is their key free agent. And if I was them, I would be really trying hard to do what it takes to retain him.
It's funny you bring that up. I put like a Pistons free agent list together, and Sam Merrill is very high on my wings list. And I think that just speaks to how I value him at the very least in terms of his shooting and what he's able to do holding up defensively. I'm with you. I think Merrill is very important, and that's where it gets interesting. This depth all of a sudden could get scary for Cleveland. I've been saying going back to the trade deadline that I wish they would find a big. They still haven't done that. They don't have that outside of the two guys. I know they can stagger them. I get it. But, Niang goes, LeVert goes. I know LeVert was going to be a free agent anyway. If you lose Ty Jerome and you lose Sam Merrill, I mean, you're putting a lot on all of a sudden, like you said, DeAndre Hunter, I guess Okoro, Jalen Tyson, who I do like. I'm interested. Maybe you can go back to Craig Porter Jr. So there's some options there, but I'm with you on the Merrill thing. I think that's the guy that I would really want to keep if I was Cleveland, unless they trade Darius. If they trade Darius, depending on what the return is, Jerome becomes a little more important to round out that backcourt, even if it's off the bench still.
I think that as we talk through this, where I'm at on it is it's probably going to be quite difficult to move Darius Garland in a deal that makes sense. I think there is a case that like Utah could figure out a way to do this, in some way, shape, or form. Basically, like pair Darius Garland, Lauri Markkanen, number 5 overall pick, some of their young guys like Kyle Filipowski, number 21 overall pick, Taylor Hendricks, hopefully coming back from injury, and like be a fairly interesting younger team at that point. They would still probably be, not competitive in the West, but would at least be building something and would be in a much more positive light. But like, that's where we have to like construct like 3-team deals where it's like, okay, so who are we sending out to a third team so that third team can send something to Cleveland that makes sense for Cleveland. Right. So that's where, it gets a little bit difficult to construct those kind of deals. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing, like, I guess in my experience is superstars hold up everybody else's market. And so I just wonder how much some of this stuff is going to happen and then what the fallout will be until and when, if Giannis gets moved. And then is KD the next domino? And I just wonder if the landscape ends up looking vastly different, Sam, by the time, if they wanted to move Darius, how much different the landscape of the NBA could potentially look if they wanted to do this, if the NBA gets held, if a lot of these deals get held up by a potential Giannis move, a potential KD move. I just wonder if that could be a factor as well. And if team structures and rosters could look completely different by the time it gets to that anyway.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's honestly a great point, Bryce. Ultimately, where I think I'm going to fall on this is that they try to keep this core together. I think that they will try to go one more year with Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen, because all of these guys are signed long-term. They're not like, Darius Garland still has 2 years after the 2025-26 season. If they want to move Garland then because this thing isn't working, that's probably where this goes, in my opinion. I think you run this out one more year and see what it looks like. The thing that I would love to do if I was them is move the DeAndre Hunter deal for some cap relief in order to retain Sam Merrill and Ty Jerome. I think that might be a little bit trickier though than what meets the eye.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, I said I think I would explore the Garland moves. I've been a little bit lower on that, fit and them exploring that. I'm completely cool, like trying it for another year. And if it's catastrophic for some reason, I don't think it will be in the regular season again. It wasn't last year. I don't think it will be in the regular season. I shouldn't say again. Then you could try to make a move at the deadline. If it falters in the playoffs again, then you take care of that in 25, 26. I don't think Darius is going to have a season where like his value completely tanks or something like that. It's just like, hey, this doesn't fit specifically between these two guys. And like I said at the top, Kenny Atkinson, one more year, all of these guys, one more year in the system. It's just like, if you're going to keep that, to your point now, how do you build out the rest of the roster? I still want them to go get another big. And if you're going to move DeAndre Hunter, then what does your wing room look like? Because that becomes very important with this backcourt of these two guys. So, you know, Strus and Merrill, but then is Jalen Tyson ready to play? You know, Dean Wade is like forwardy, you know, what is that? He
does a good job on the wing defensively, though.
Yeah. No, I like Dean Wade, small town Kansas, stand up, but I just, you gotta have that depth. That how much did we rave about their depth all regular season long? And I realize it didn't end up mattering as much in the playoffs. I get it, but going and getting and winning these games and being a higher seed and all of that is helpful come playoff time. So I'm interested to see how they would build out the roster then if they try to run it back with how expensive they're about to be.
I mean, the other move here is just moving Isaac Okoro's money as well. And there are just like a number. It's actually drastically easier to move the Okoro money than it is to move the Hunter money, because there are a number of different trade exceptions that Okoro can fit into. Isaac Okoro is slated to make next season $11 million per year. There are just a ton of, you know, trade exceptions kind of lying around where, you know, if I'm Brooklyn, like I might be willing to take a flyer to see like, hey, what does Isaac Okoro look like for the next 2 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I'm Atlanta and I might need like another defensive wing next to Trae Young, you know, send Isaac Okoro home. He's from the Atlanta area. Like there's a case to be made that like, if you do that, even like not, you know, giving up any asset value. So I think Okoro at 11 is probably like a slight overpay, but it's one that I think a team for 2 years might be willing to go for just to see what it looks like. That gets you like very close to under the second apron as it is, just by moving him. Maybe you try to retain Sam Merrill or Ty Jerome or something because you've then moved to Okoro and you just live as a second apron team for a year.
Yeah, That's what makes me nervous about keeping it together, I guess, as well. You know, until we did this, I didn't realize how salary cap strapped, I guess, this team had all of a sudden become. And as excited as I am, and I'm sure they still are for Evan Mobley's ascent, that added another $8 million to the salary cap this season. And when you're already over the cap and you're talking about over the second apron, that really matters. It's the difference between having to, if we move Isaac Okoro into somebody's trade exception, we can operate the way we want, to now it's, well, that doesn't quite do it. We actually have to move DeAndre Hunter's $22 million into somebody's cap space because there aren't that many trade exceptions out that big. And now it becomes much more difficult to do it. So while it's awesome that Evan Mobley's made this growth and taken this step, it has changed the finances quite literally, but how you navigate them and how they can make that work and the flexibility of it.
Given that they are not a repeater tax team this year, because they stayed under the tax last season, I would hope that they just kind of decide, okay, we're going to spend a bunch of money this year, and, you know, damn it, you know, we'll figure it out maybe in season. If somebody gets hurt, maybe DeAndre Hunter will be valuable to another team with only 1 year left on his deal at that point beyond the current season. I don't think they keep both Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. I would hope that they keep one of those guys is where I would sit on it. And I know that, again, like, you're blasting over the second apron if you do that. And I hope they're able to move like maybe Isaac Okoro, but I think that where I'm at on this is you probably are a second apron team at this point. You might just kind of have to embrace that for a season and see where it sits. And I know it's difficult and it's a little bit hard, but given that you're also not a repeater tax team and you're not like expending a crazy amount of money on some of these players by retaining them, I would hope that they're able to like just look in the mirror and go for it. The issue is though, like if Ty Jerome, I think makes like 14 million or 13 million, I think they are paying like 60 million for him in total based on how far over the tax they are right now. And it's just hard to make that kind of financial commitment. As much as I love Ty Jerome, like essentially saying, we're paying max money to keep Ty Jerome is really hard.
Well, and that's the thing is the tax situation isn't something that they're probably going to be able to get under. Like they're not going to be
Correct.
able to do that because I think with the Mobley stuff, like you're getting closer to 30 million over already. So even moving DeAndre Hunter doesn't even get it below that. So, and the other thing
is already, Bryce, like they're slated to pay $57 million in luxury tax before anything with Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. So it's hard.
And the thing is, if you get into the season, it's not working like you said, then you make the moves at the deadline to get under some of this stuff. And, and you can make that decision then. But yeah, I want to be clear. I know it's not easy to quote unquote shop Darius Garland. And then if you don't like the returns you can get, just not trade him. Like I understand the practicality of that is way, way more personal and difficult than me just saying it. So because of that, if that means they just don't shop in it at all, I would understand that. Because if you're not sold that you want to move and this isn't going to work, then you can't take the risk of just pissing him off and, him being unhappy if you don't find a deal you like.
Okay. So final roundup here. Darius Garland, a guy that we would look at moving, but probably would end up, unless something really came up that we loved, likely on the team next year, I would say.
Agree. Yeah, probably. Likely.
Probably going to struggle to retain Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill is the reality.
Yeah.
Maybe they can keep Merrill if he ends up being cheaper than what I anticipate, but I think he probably gets 8 to 10 million a year. I would guess.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think Jerome's probably a little bit over that, honestly. So that's
and unless people get really nervous about the playoff performance and that hurts his, it's not going to tank his market, but could hurt his market depending on the teams in play. But in general, I agree.
Would very strongly look at moving DeAndre Hunter. Probably going to be tough. I do think it'd probably be easier to move Isaac Okoro in order to get closer to that second apron-ish area. And then you're really hoping for guys like Craig Porter, Jalen Tyson to be able to play next year. And the other thing that you mentioned briefly that I really agree with, but I just don't know how we're going to get there is they do, I think, need a third big.
Yeah.
Because obviously Tristan Thompson is a free agent. Maybe they just bring back Tristan, but I think they could use one more big in the room as well. And I'm actually not sure how they're going to get there either.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this since before the deadline. We thought that was a move they could make. And I think adding another different piece of what those two guys are, maybe somebody a little more versatile, maybe somebody that in a specific Pacers series holds up a little bit better against Tyrese Halliburton could be an interesting move. Finding that name and acquiring that name is much more difficult.
They get drastically worse if they do something like Drew Holiday for Darius Garland, right? And that deal doesn't solve the money problems for Boston either. So I don't even know that makes sense, but yeah. If Boston was willing to give them multiple picks on top of Drew Holiday.
It doesn't help their money. I guess we're not trying to solve Cleveland's money issues. We're saying go past anyway.
Yeah. And I don't think Boston or I don't think Cleveland would do this because I think they would be way too worried about moving Garland to Boston and then having to deal with them for a long time. I don't think this makes sense. I'm just trying to find an answer. And then you brought up the Jalen Suggs idea. I don't mind it. It's just that it's going to have to be a lot with Jalen Suggs. Yeah. If you're Orlando and you're doing this, you're going to have to give up a lot. And I would want to know dead to rights what Jalen Suggs' knee situation looks like after he tore his meniscus this season. I believe it was meniscus. Apologies if I'm misspeaking there. Look, like there are deals to be made. I just wonder if we're kind of talking about deals at the end of the day, just to talk about deals, when in reality, this team won 64 games and was fucking awesome this year.
Yeah. It seems a little bit like it because, and I'll be honest, I was initially going to come in stronger with, hey, this team needs to make moves. And I like calmed down and thought about it. And it's like, again, what if the Pacers win the NBA championship, Sam? Like, does like all of a sudden it's like, do you feel like you lost to the Pacers? You lost to the NBA champs. And so when you weren't even fully healthy. So is that justified enough to, maybe it is. Maybe you say like, hey, you're not better than the best team, so it's time to make a move. I don't know. I don't know that I would do that. The Pacers are really good. I think that's part of I keep bringing this up because I think that's part of the equation is it's like, oh, you lost to the Pacers. You need to reset. It's like, no, the Pacers are effing awesome. I'm not saying that's reason to not look at improving your team, but it's not like something to be upset about or embarrassed about. The Pacers are really freaking good, especially in the playoffs.
It's 100% right, but that's also the greatness that they're chasing right now too. Like
Very
they are,
true. Yes,
they are trying to beat the Pacers. Like it's a competitive zero-sum league. Like you either win in a playoff series or you lose the playoff series, right? So it's important to be able to look at it and say, okay, do we have the juice?
I agree.
To be able to beat them, yes or no?
Yes.
If the answer is no, then you probably do have to try and make some moves. If you think that, Darius just got hurt and we can make things work a different way, then, I'm all for maybe continuing down this road a little bit longer and seeing what it looks like.
That's the point right there. You have to have internal, real self-reflection of, did we lose because we just don't have what it takes to beat that team? Or did we lose because we do have the answers and we just didn't find them in the moment? And you have to be honest with yourself about that.
Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, NBA Draft, obviously some Pistons directly related content on those two things. Got the Substack and the Pistons Pulse podcast. Otherwise, right here with the Sam Vecenie on Game Theory. Subscribe, like, hit all of the buttons that you catch us every single episode.
We appreciate all of you for coming through and watching all of the content that we have put out. We are speeding up quickly as we get into the offseason and NBA draft cycle. Go to The Athletic, keep me employed over there. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel where you'll get nice graphics that explain everything we're talking about, in addition to our faces talking about all of the things that we go through. Subscribe on the many podcast feeds that all of you guys use. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.